Okay, I'm going to start with this opening slide as an opportunity to do some housekeeping. I do have captions enabled. I have them at the top of the screen. And for those folks that don't know how to turn them on, I'm going to move my cursor over there. This is a Google slide deck. If you hover in the corner here, there's these 3 dots. There's options to enable captions. I like my captions at the top, and I put them at, I think, medium to large. The reason I put them on the top is because this is recorded on the internet, and sometimes the captions on the bottom will cover those up. But I also want to be very mindful for people who are listening in live if they need them for, ASL or any other, or ESL or any other purposes. I do like pretty images, so there's images in this slide deck. Most of them are decorative, but if you've ever been to one of my alternative text talks, I say there's no such thing as a decorative image, because if you have it up there, it evokes emotion. But for the sake of brevity, if it is just sort of encapsulating what is said and reinforcing what's on the screen, I won't necessarily describe the image. I am Amy June Heinlein, all one word title, camel case, Amy June. I use the pronouns she and her. I am in Drupal, but I recently moved over to a larger open source project, and I'm on the editorial team for opensource.com. As a Quaker, I believe that, well, I believe and I wish that peace resides in all of us, and violence and war are never the only option. So some people might think that this is old news, but this is current, this is happening now. And I really want to hold in light those that live in the Ukraine, people who live in danger, the Russians who are shocked and dismayed at what's happening. So yeah, just a little bit of a reminder that, we still are in this together. This is Spot. He's my cat. Spot is his short name. Spotty McSpot's a lot for long. And if there's any typos or mistakes in the slide deck, it's because he helps me. So I just always want to have him up there. And he's super cute, super cute. So what will we discuss today? We'll go over some of the basics of accessibility concepts along with some specific guidelines around security measures. And the reason why I go into the basics is because I don't want to assume anyone's knowledge level, but I don't go into the basics too deep because we're all smart people. We can research what we don't know on our own. So we'll look at some security options, and then we'll also look at some alternative options that are more accessible and available. So I'll start with the WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. If I can get my mouse back. Yes.
Okay, you got HDMI. If you go to your audio settings, oh, I guess you're presenting just, okay, you should be good then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I just can't find my mouse, but.
Oh, weird. Oh, it's not on your screen. Oh, are you like
here we go.
screening?
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else?
I think we're good.
Okay.
Everyone on Hopkins hears me and sees me, so
Perfect.
we're good. Thanks for checking.
Of course. If you need anything, I'll be
okay.
bouncing around.
Okay. So we were doing a little tech check. Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. We see often as WCAG. This is really just a goal with a shared standards in mind, people who need a shared group of standards. They're intended for people who develop the web. They're intended for people who create the tools to help us develop the web. They're created for people who make the evaluation tools. And again, really, it's about just having that shared standard. And it's a success criteria, so it's not an end all. This is a good baseline. And then something I really like to point out is accessibility, inclusion, and user experience are very different things. They complement each other really well, but they are very different. Moving on, kind of drilling down into that WCAG, it's based on 4 principles. You'll sometimes see POUR. It's that high-level acronym for perceivable. Perceivable means the user can identify content and elements by means of their senses. Operable means that they can use the controls, they can navigate, they can use buttons, and any other interactive elements. Understandable, they can comprehend the content, and they can also comprehend the web page from page to page. And then the last one is robust, and this one, we talk about this one a lot along with perceivable when it comes to security measures. But robust means that our users should be able to use whatever technology they need to access your digital asset. So, you know, a lot of us might think that, you know, we have the standard keyboard and mouse combination. Well, there's a lot of us around that don't use that. So let's, you know, think about all of the different user agents. So, you know, make your assets easy to see so you accommodate visual needs. And this is a beautiful picture of an eye with a rainbow going through it with some real pretty makeup. This is a real gorgeous picture. The CDC reports that 12 million people 40 years and older live with some kind of vision impairment. That's a huge number. And that includes people who are blind, but it also takes into account, like, you know, we're outside on our cell phones or our screen is cracked and we can't see that. So that's a case where you know, have to accommodate a visual need. Motor needs make it easy to interact with, so accommodate motor needs. You know, we have people who live with palsies from Parkinson's, or maybe they're handling a baby on a bus and they only have one arm. You know, we have to think about abilities beyond permanent disabilities. Auditory needs, you need to make sure that it's easy to hear, so we accommodate auditory needs. We just want to make sure, like, there's a couple, like, I'm hard of hearing, so I need it. But also, Mark's hard of hearing when he's on the BART because there's so many people around him. You know, Greg might be hard of hearing on the plane, you know, and he doesn't have his headphones, but then there's no captions on the video you want to watch, so you're kind of stuck just watching. So it's about, like, thinking about all of those things. And cognitive needs, you know, we want to make sure that it's easy to understand. This can include people who are distracted. It could be people who have a difficult time focusing. And user agents, you know, this is going beyond the keyboard and mouse combination. You know, this is assistive technology. Sometimes we'll see it abbreviated as AT. It's any device or equipment that helps people work around some of the challenges that still exist on the web. You know, the challenges they may have in learning and communicating and functioning on the web. So screen readers are usually at the top of people's minds. They're used to listen to the content of a web page. They convert text to speech. But we need to keep in mind that screen readers can be used along with visuals on a web page for people who live with cognitive challenges. Alternative input devices, there's a few of them. I just have several up here on the screen. The picture up here is a refreshable Braille device. You can actually input Braille, but as your screen reader, in conjunction with this refreshable Braille device, as the screen reader reads aloud, the keys at the bottom dynamically change so people can, you know, read in Braille. You know, we have head pointers, we have motion tracking, we have eye tracking, we have single switch devices, we have large print or tactile keyboards. My brother's a quadriplegic, so he uses a lot of assistive technology. You know, a switch might be something that he can use his head to navigate from page to page, or when he's playing a video game, you know, because all he has is his head and his tongue. I don't know about you, but as I get older, web pages seem to get smaller and smaller, and I'm constantly doing the command ++. So screen magnification software I use on a daily basis because I can't use the default settings in my browser. And it basically is what its name is. It's enlarging the screen content. This helps people who live with partial sight impairment, but it also has that text-to-speech functionality as well. So a lot of these user agents can do a few different things. So eye tracking, this is a system that monitors eye movement to control the mouse or the pointer to initiate selections and clicks. Accelerators, it's software and functionality that actually helps reduce the effort of clicking. Keyboard customization, we do this a lot as developers because some of us like just to do it quicker and are sort of lazy. So this means mapping our keys, creating shortcut keys, setting filters, our sticky keys. A lot of folks will need to support one-handed typing and use the keyboard customization. Pop-up and animation blockers, these can be browser plugins that stop those automated pop-ups from redirecting where you are on the screen. I'll talk a little bit about pop-ups and why I don't like them later on in the presentation. And then we have that refreshable braille display that we saw on the last slide. You know, it's that terminal that dynamically changes the keys. Reading assistants, these can be anything that changes, customizes the font size, the size, the spacing. A reading assistant can scan your text for complex words and link you to a thesaurus or a dictionary. Sometimes a reading assistant will read it out loud and then have a visible focus of where it is on the page for people who get distracted. And then we have page maps, which display a small image of the web page on the side where the person can see where they are on the web page. I work at Red Hat, and I'm going to call them out every time. You know, they hired me as a hard of hearing individual, and they know that, and I've been working there for 7 months. So I have to utilize captions in my browser, but when people share their screen in meetups, the screen gets really small, and I can no longer see the text, and they called me an edge case recently. So I like this quote because when you call something an edge case, you're really defining the limits of what you care about. So that's why I go into like what all those user agents are and how we can use them in different ways, because it really hurt my feelings to be called that edge case. So we're moving into, you know, the security part of it, talking about authentication. It's really our first defense when it comes to security in our digital assets. You know, when authentication requires user input, best practices should include giving your users options and choices. And this is going to be the theme sort of throughout this. And I'm going to say that again. It's about giving your users choices and options because we all use technology different. So there is a guideline around authentication. 3.3.7, Accessible Authentication. The idea is to ensure that there's an accessible, easy to use, secure method to log in, access your content, and actually be able to perform the tasks as well. So if you're working on a higher ed website or the guidelines are WCAG, you know, 2.0, this is something to bring your websites up to compliance. It really benefits, you know, people who have cognitive issues related to memory, people who have issues around reading, like maybe they read the fonts different or, you know, mix up the letters a little bit, that's dyslexia. But we also have folks who don't always read numbers the same way as all of us, and that's dyscalculia. And then people who have perception processing limitations, and they really should be able to authenticate regardless of the level of their cognitive abilities. So it's, you know, that edge case, right?
While you're talking, do you mind questions while you're talking?
No, I don't mind.
I was curious if you had any feedback about Drupal specifically with authentication mechanisms, or maybe you'll get to that.
I'll get to some of them. Yeah. Greg asked a question if I was going to talk about some Drupal specifics, and I'll be talking about those later. And to those of you online, I'm not going to see your questions because my material is covering up your window. Okay.
And I'll let you know if I see questions.
Okay. And I don't know your name. Okay. It's hard. I can't hear anyway. So, okay. So gated content. I work at opensource.com, and I might as well call out my own site, right? We have gated content that leads to buy Red Hat Linux, whatever. Gated content requires a user to fill out a form or purchase a subscription. Gated content can be online materials like white papers, articles and videos that require that users fill out a form before they can access them. White papers, marketers create white papers to educate the audience about a particular issue and maybe does some explanation and promotion of a particular methodology. Ebooks are usually behind some kind of wall. Those are electronic books that are produced for the web. Webinars and learning courses are often behind a wall. Email curations, forums, people are on Discourse or Reddit. Sometimes, you have to pay to play to do those sort of things. And then, this can also include exclusive communities, like I said, like forums or Discourse, but also access to surveys and links and content entry forms as well. So common security measures. I don't go into any like real advanced ones because this isn't an advanced talk. Captchas. Most of us have seen these, but what are they? I think a lot of us take them for granted. Captions are completely automated public Turing tests to tell computers and humans apart. We've seen them as simple as a checkbox. I have an image up here that's asking me if I'm not a robot, one-click checkbox. Sometimes we see images. Sometimes they have letters, or we're listening to the letters. Or maybe even they have a math puzzle. We've seen them progress a few different ways over the years. I have a picture up here of a Captcha that wants you to click on the flower. And this one's pretty okay because there's only one flower, but I don't know if you've seen it sometimes where some of the pictures like, there's like one little piece of flower and I'm not sure if that's gonna do it or not, and they get confusing. And not everyone can see the screen and identify images either. When we talk about standard image accessibility, we talk about alt text. But when we add alt text to our images and our captchas, it kind of defeats the purpose of weeding out the bot. Because it makes it easier for it to parse and it'll know the answer. Sometimes we put simple questions like 4 + 2 = Again, this can be challenging for people who might not, who have cognitive processing issues or dyscalculia. So we want to make sure that we offer alternatives to the CAPTCHAs that are accessible for your entire audience, including people who live with vision, hearing, and neurocognitive disabilities. Timers. I'm a big concert goer, and timers get me every single time. These are time-based mechanisms to complete your transaction. It can be just to complete your security code, or it can be to be an auction, that kinds of things. And there's a guideline around this, 2.2, providing enough time, provide users enough time to read and use the content. We want to provide enough time for people to finish their task. Not everyone can zip through a form or enter their credit card information or look at their phone and be able to translate from the Authenticator app to the computer. Dyscalculia, there's sometimes just not enough time. So we're going to talk a little bit about timing, adjusting the timing, and then no timing. We want to be sure that your interruptions can be postponed or suppressed by the user. We want to make sure that certain users are warned of the duration of any activity too. And then we also want to warn them if their data is going to be lost, because sometimes you can quickly log back in or do the yes, keep me logged in, but then they have to start the form again. So why we do that, I don't know, but we need to tell them that that's going to happen. Their data is going to get cleared. And people with disabilities may require more time to complete activities. This is an image of a session being timed out. Someone who has a reading disability like dyslexia will likely take a little bit longer to read and understand and process the instructions or text on a form. Someone who is deaf or hard of hearing may be more comfortable with sign language than the written word. And that slows them down. Or perhaps you're reading in a not native to your own language, and so that slows you down. Someone who relies on screen reading software because they are blind or have a vision impairment or a learning disability, they could take more time actually even locating all of the elements on the page that they need to fill out or understanding the page's layout. So unless the time is longer than 20 minutes, all timed sessions should have the ability to be turned off, adjusted, and extended, unless it's essential for the activity. And there are some like that, but those are very few. A good example would be, and I don't agree with this because I love concert tickets and my wallet's upstairs and I have to run and get my wallet, and then the cat wants something and I can never get it in time. But for like an online auction, if you're holding a product, you know, sometimes extending that timer doesn't make sense because that product could be put on hold for a long amount of time. TOTPs, these are time-based one-time passwords. The image here is a couple of my email addresses. You know, I try to log in and they ask me for a code. So I have an app and I have to make sure that I fill out the numbers before the moon goes around. Again, comes down to turning off the timing, adjusting the timing, and extended the timing. And these code-based or number-based passwords, they can hinder people who have sight, cognitive, and motor impairments. It might be difficult for someone who has cognitive processing issues to take the code from one screen to another in the designated amount of time. Sometimes the authenticator applications and messagings aren't compatible with screen readers. So sometimes they have these apps, but you know, if they can't see them, there's no screen reader to read them their number. Again, timing, you know, adjust the timing, turn off the timing, have the ability to extend the timing. Identity verification. We're going to talk a little bit about some different methods. Biometrics. This refers to humans or beings' physical or behavioral traits. This can take the form of voice recognition. You know, someone has a sort, or, okay, so we have these ways that we can use biometrics to log in. I can hold up my iPhone and it'll recognize my face. I can put in my fingerprint on a good day and it'll recognize my fingerprint. But there's some times that these mechanisms fail people. Voice recognition, someone has a sore throat, or their microphone isn't working properly, you know, so they're not able to identify themselves. Facial recognition, it does not require sight, hearing, significant motor skills, making it a really viable and easy option for a lot of people. But we have folks who wear face masks. We have folks that wear, you know, scarves. We have people who grew beards over COVID. And these were all things that were not able to let them log into their phones and such. Fingerprint scanning, I've done this, I'm a gardener, I work in the garden a lot. Sometimes my fingers are dirty or chapped, but I have to push that button to get to the phone call or whatever, and it doesn't recognize my fingerprint all the time. And then we have folks that might have a palsy and can't quite get it on there the whole time to recognize their fingerprint. Eye recognition is great. It can actually tell twins apart. I didn't know this until I started working on this presentation because it uses the iris for matching. But as we get older and maybe we don't use our biometrics enough, you can develop a cataract, and the cataract might keep your device from recognizing you. So this is just something to think about when we think about biometrics. Multi-factor authentication, MFA. This takes a lot of different forms. We've got our SMS, phone text messages. You know, these are texted codes. They might be a little bit less secure than the authenticator apps, but they're a common solution because they're easy and readily available, not much complication involved. But this trade-off might be worth it for folks who have difficulty typing those codes in quickly, you know, forgetting from one thing to the next. Screen readers and text-to-speech functions are more likely to work too seamlessly on these with native app texting. Then we have our authentication apps, you know, connected tokens. That's something I use for Red Hat, you know, because I'm constantly having to log into the VPN. So I have a token that checks that it's me all the time. It requires a dongle that I put into my device. It sometimes requires a second step, but not usually. You know, maybe it's like pressing a button or doing my fingerprint on my on my Mac. But they do not usually require entering an access code. And then we have single sign-on. You know, single sign-on significantly reduces the friction by requiring only one login across all of your things. I cannot wait for Drupal to move to a single sign-on because that would be spectacular. And then let's talk about identity verification. We sort of shifted to a more home-based system the last few years. You know, we weren't going into the bank as often as we were. We weren't going into the DMV. So things to identify or to verify our identification. Scanning IDs and certificates. You know, we have bank apps that scan our checks. We have vaccination records, which we've been having to upload. We have certificate-based signatures, you know, things like PDFs, because we're not going into the real estate office and signing your rental and things like that. But sometimes folks who live with palsy,
That's not showing on
no, it's fine on the hop-in, yeah. You know, people that have a little bit of shaking, maybe you haven't eaten, you know, I like to use real world stuff for us too, and you're a little shaky, you're not able to hold your phone still, or maybe you can't hold that document in a way that is still enough for the computer app to scan. And then a person who has low vision might not be able to line up the scanner and see the lines in a way that, you know, fits into the way the app wants it to scan. This is a screenshot of logging into a Google email account. It shows, you know, what email I'm logging into, and then it has my passcode. And it also allows me the opportunity to show my password. This is great. This is a huge accessibility feature. You know, older people, they can't remember what they've already typed, or you don't know because you're on your phone if you typed an M versus an N. So what can we do about hidden passwords? We can label our form controls. That way people understand where they are on the form, you know. We can allow copy and paste functionality. We can have our password in a super secret desktop file, and you have your password there, and you copy and paste it into your password field. And then also allowing tools to fill in credentials, you know, like our LastPass and our Bitwarden and things like that. A couple of notes about alerts, modules, and other pop-up-y things. There's a, you know, the WCAG is broken down into lots of levels, and the other two examples I gave were like 2.2 or 3.3, where this is a whole concept. We're going to talk about operable. The user interface components in the navigation must be operable. And pop-ups and alerts are, unless you've taken the time, are very rarely operable. There's a few different reasons, and I have some of the guidelines broken down here. Target size. Can someone on a mobile phone who might have large fingers close the window? Or someone who has palsy, can they get to that target with their mouse? Focus order. Does the user have to tab through absolutely everything on the web page, through the article, through the mega menu, through the footer, just to hit the X on your pop-up? You know, if that pop-up's taking up a lot of real estate, I highly doubt they're going to stay on your page very long. Can the person see where they are on the pop-up? Like if they're tabbing through it, do you have that pop-up or alert invisible focus so people know that's where they are on the page? And then once they get in that pop-up, say there's no X or whatever, when they get into that little keyboard mechanism, can they get out? A lot of times people can get into those, but then they have no way out, and that's called a keyboard trap. An accessible module dialog is one where the keyboard focus is properly managed, of course, and the correct information is exposed to screen readers as well. So as it moves focus, the screen reader knows where it's on the page. You can use things like HTML or ARIA, which is ARIA. You can do those for like some of the semantic information. And then you can also do some stuff with CSS and JavaScript to make the behavior more predictable. So here's a picture of a pop-up, and this is opensource.com. This is one of those where I think we fixed it, but we had to tab through absolutely everything to get to that X. And then also it appeared every time you logged into the page. If you were on the site and you were navigating and you went to a different menu, the pop-up would come up on the next page too. And it's like, why? I just saw this pop-up. You know, have some sort of memory, you know, the user's not going to want to do that twice. So JavaScript pop-up should only be used if they add a significant advantage to the functionality. And they should be able to function even if the JavaScript is disabled, because we do have a lot of folks who disable JavaScript and CSS in their browsers. If the pop-up opens a new window or a tab, you know, maybe it has the target attribute or script or something like that, then the label needs to say that it's going to open it up in a different window. Many users, you know, both screen readers and like the visual browsers, they get confused when they don't realize a new window is open because they're trying to hit the back button, realizing, oh, I don't know what's wrong because a new window has opened up or a new tab. We want to avoid disabling scroll bars and resizing options. You know, people with low vision may need to resize windows to accommodate larger text. So same rules apply in there. You know, we want to make sure that people who have, you know, cranked up to 200 times, they're only going to see subscribe to our newsletter, and they're not going to know that it's a form. And then if they can't scroll in that pop-up, they can't get to the information you want to share with them. Another set of guidelines on status messages. You know, we work in Drupal, we see status messages pop up all the time. It makes our users aware of important changes in content, and and when we do this, we want to make sure it does it in a way that doesn't interrupt our work. So there's a couple of criteria about error identification, labels and instructions, and error suggestions. I think Drupal does a very good job of just having it at the top of the screen. It's very nondescript and not very bright, and you know, you've seen the green, you've done a good job. Alerts and status messages. There's that Drupal system. What is it called?
Yeah.
Set message?
Yeah.
Okay, the Drupal set message. You can see I saved some content and said, you know, my article had been saved. But we want to be able to provide means to turn off non-essential alerts. We want to make sure that the use of the color and the hidden icons are not the only ways of conveying information. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that this Drupal set message is not accessible for color contrast, something to think about. Not only for our colorblind folks, but for folks who have like glares on their screen too. Sometimes you can't see that blue against the green, depending on your resolution and stuff like that. So, you know, kind of going through this, I really wanted to just sort of stress that we always want to provide our users with alternatives. We don't want to have them feel left out. Remember, there's all sorts of different disabilities. There's situational disabilities, like the mom on the bus, or, you know, I have a cane sometimes that I walk with and I can only have one hand on my phone. There's temporary disabilities. My wife went in for eye surgery and had LASIK, and so she couldn't see for a couple of days while she was healing, but that went away. And then we have our permanent disabilities, you know, like my brother who's quadriplegic and more than likely will always live with that disability. And then I have some links to additional resources and tools, and I will make sure that these get out on the Drupal Colorado Camp website because they're clickable and they have a lot of information about different alerts. And I have this list of tools on there, which is pretty cool, that kind of help out determine how accessible your digital assets are. My favorite one is Site Improved Browser Extension. It's not free, it's not open source. It's free, that it's a free browser extension. But the reason I like it is because it's a one-click. You click on it and it tells you the errors, but it also tells you what to manually check for. So as you're learning accessibility and you want to become better at accessibility, you can go through and it'll be like, hey, there's this image here. Does it have an alt text? There's this link. It's redundant to this, and all sorts of different ones. So that's my favorite tool, just because that's how I learned a lot about what to check for manually. Because remember, with accessibility, we have tools that are programmed and they're only as good as what they're programmed for. And a lot of these security ones, it's hard to test, except for user testing. So, and that's what I have. I'm a little bit short, but that's okay. Oh yeah, Tara, wearing gloves really affects the ability for the fingerprint. Any questions? Okay, great. And because of who I am, if you want to ask me questions or have questions, you can reach out to me in LinkedIn. Not that top QR code, but that bottom QR code is to LinkedIn. And I love answering questions on LinkedIn. But if you want to write an article for opensource.com, you can do that too. But it's more important if you want to ask me questions, to connect with me on LinkedIn.
What kinds of articles do you want on opensource.com?
So this is interesting because I'm new blood. You know, it's been around for 12 years. And one of the reasons they liked me was because of my diversity in the tech set I have. Not that I know all the tech, but it was diverse from what they typically had articles about. So I've been asking for a lot of like Drupal and accessibility and like PHP and Symfony, things that we don't typically see. But what makes a good article is completely different, right? We love articles that are tutorials, like this X solved X issue. I have this solution for X, Y, and Z. I have this open source project that's really fantastic, and this is why, you know. But it's not just about tools and projects either. It's about open culture and about open practice. So anything that sort of is helping open source, like with momentum, you know, and then there's some caveats to the, and I've had to work with my Drupal friends a little bit with this too, because we have these Drupal projects that we maintain, but there's one part of it that's proprietary and that no longer makes it an open source option, right? And I'm going to use Doxel as an example. I worked at Canopy and they supported Doxel, and I was like, hey, write an article on Doxel. But they couldn't because it had to use Docker Desktop. But I can have DDev write an article on on the local environment tool because you can use Kalima instead. So as long as there's an option to have an open source thing for whatever made your project not open source, but we're really a stickler about that.
Yeah.
Just got to be open source. Someone just has to spin it up and do everything that they can do and not rely on anything that's closed source. But it's a lot of fun. I'm having a lot of fun meeting people and learning all the Linux stuff, and it's interesting.
Good.
Yeah. But I'd love more Drupal articles about what does your project solve. It might be niche, but you know, some of the articles that we have, like they might only get 4 page views, but 4 people found what they were looking for. And I think that's spectacular, you know. And opensource.com, we get like, 2.2 million readers a month. You might not get that on your article, but you might get a couple thousand,
Yeah.
you know, and I just think that that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, and I really want more accessibility articles, but it's really hard for me to ask my accessibility friends and colleagues because our site's not accessible. You know what I mean? It's like, yes, we didn't underline our links, you know, so it's nice because we just did an upgrade from Drupal 7 to Drupal 9, and I came like in the middle of it. So they weren't quite thinking about that. But then when I came on and I did an audit, and they're like, so now it's in the queue to get all those things up to date. But anything that makes a more inclusive web, you know, and open source does.